So welcome to Financial Dilemmas, a podcast where we talk about real money decisions. Women are facing decisions all the time, and sometimes we can help with a little nudge here and there that turns maybe some confusion into some confidence, or be useful in terms of some tools you might like to turn to help you with those decisions. And today's story is one I hear often, especially from self-employed women. You work hard, you build a business, you've moved from sort of scraping things together to finally earning a little bit. And then you can't quite shake the fear that it might not all carry on going in the right direction, and that something might knock things off track. And you should be, I don't know, having a great big contingency fund set aside in case that happens, out of fear, rather than it really making kind of number crunching sense to do that. So we need to address that. We need to think about it. And that's exactly why we're kind of unpacking today's story with Helen, because she's navigating exactly that type of thinking. So I'd like Helen to start by kind of introducing you to the group and to ask you how you tell me about your business. Tell me what made you go self-employed and what the startup story was.
Sure. So thank you for having me. I've been in corporate for most of my life. And it was, when I started at 16, it was job for life. That was kind of, it made sense. But as I got into my probably mid 40s, I started feeling that I wasn't fulfilled kind of where I was. I was very motivated by my own kind of values and beliefs, but they weren't necessarily aligned. And I think I just wore myself out. And for me, I think burnout collided with perimenopause, and I just, I just broke. And so I had a conversation with my husband, and it was a bit of it's a now or never type thing. I'd always wondered if I could run my own company. So I'm a coach, and I love working with people. And it was always in the back of my mind, like, could you really do this for yourself? Mm-hmm. And so I thought, you know what? Now's the time. So I decided that I would break from the corporate world and set up my own business, which was full of adventure. Unfortunately for me, it was just before COVID. So I left. I took the leap into the unknown in the December before COVID hit. And I had was sure that I was going to do in-person coaching, face-to-face with people. That's where my strengths were. And COVID happened, and everything kind of shattered. So the next couple of years, well, certainly the first year was, self-funded, completely into my savings, and had to kind of work out what I would look like in this new world, and kept putting deadlines on when I would get a proper job, and go back to the corporate world. But I had this commitment to self that I was like, no, I know that actually it's going to take longer than this, because I think in your fantasy world, when you set up for yourself, you're like, it'll be a couple of months, and, then and it wasn't like that at all. So it was terrifying, I would say.
Okay. And so what feels different now that the business is more established and you do have some kind of like a regular or stable income to rely on?
Well, I went for the first couple of years, I didn't earn enough to even pay tax. And I would question, like, do I really need to get that train ticket? I know that comes out of cars, so that kind of fear, to now being, I would say, financially secure, which is a lovely place. But I do feel like I am a little bit waiting for the other shoe to drop. So working for yourself, there are no guarantees. So if it goes quiet, like there are certain times of the year where it's, quieter than others, and you have to kind of provision for that. So it takes a lot of thinking about, how do I plan for the future? So financially, I'm in a much, much better place, but I'm still very cautious.
Okay. And you mentioned that keeping your money easily accessible was part of the kind of contingency planning. What makes you think that it being accessible makes you safer?
I think it's because I'm not naturally organized. Like, I've got 25 spreadsheets that say the same thing, because I'm like, let's just analyze this data, even though I don't know what it says. And so the idea of making money accessible is, if I haven't thought about something, I can get to it. My biggest commitment financially has been to put some money into an account that I can't access for a year. Like, it took me a long time to commit to that, because there was a bigger kind of percentage on the savings rate if you didn't access it for a year. But even when I did that, I still had some easily accessible money and kind of budgeted for what I could afford to put into that. So it's really about, there's some eventualities that I haven't considered that are going to come and bite me on the bum. And so that's why I need to see the money and know where it is.
So it does sound like you've done the hard work. And you've now reached a place where you can look forward with a certain amount of reassurance that things are going to be okay in the future. But you're still kind of holding on to the contingency fund just in case. And I think that's a really usual story for somebody who's moving from PAYE to self-employed, from having, when you go on holiday, you still get paid, to not getting paid when you're not working. These are all things that, as you say, you have to provision for. And keeping money accessible to pay the bills when you're not earning because you're on holiday makes you feel safer about taking that holiday, or, maybe not being able to work, or having expected work that didn't actually show up, and that fill in the gap. So thanks for explaining that to us. And I think what you're describing really is kind of this the financial stagnation is the problem. Is that when we earn money and then we park it somewhere where it can't grow just in case, we're actually going backwards at that point. And it really bothers me that, like, when it comes to being an investor, you have all these warnings that flash up. Your capital is at risk. If you think about doing a stocks and shares ISA or something, big warning, capital's at risk. But when you open a bank account and put the money in there, it doesn't say buying power at risk, when actually that's a very big risk to the money if it's left sat in, even if you do commit to like a 1 year, not spending any of it and getting a slightly better interest rate. It's unlikely to be an interest rate that can compete with inflation. So history tells us that money on cash deposit loses its buying power, whereas stocks and shares or other investments like your pension tend to get a real return above inflation over the long term. And you end up creating real gains on that money because of the enterprise element of it being invested. So it's a real quandary, isn't it? That if we convince ourselves that liquidity, so having money available to spend, equals security, actually that starts to nibble away at our long-term security, because we're losing buying power in later life by having too much, too safe for too long. So I think that's just a risk that gets away from us. It kind of sneaks under our radar, and we're not watching that longer term picture as closely as we're aware of our short term feeling that if we've got a bunch of money in the bank, we're going to be okay, regardless of anything, no matter what happens. So I think that equating liquidity with security is a kind of undermining factor in our financial thinking. But the fear of letting go of cash because of financial uncertainty is a very real and current fear. And it's trying to balance those two things, while we're trying to work full time as well.
Yeah, it's another thing to think about, isn't it? It's like when you work for yourself, you've got to be marketing, HR, everything. And so thinking about money, which is also terrifying at the same time, I think it's almost like I put it in the it's in a bank account, that's safe. Let's just leave it there. Because exactly as you say, like as soon as I look at anything and it says this investment can go up as well as down, you know, like I'm like, oh no. You know, like my biggest risk, like at the fun fair, is like the 2p slot game. You know, like that's like I can't do it. I'm terrified. And also, like family wise, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So like I remember my mum having, this is a savings account for shoes. This is a savings account, you know, like she would have little pots that she would be saving for. So I don't, and also like having not had a lot of money, like you don't think about the investment part of it. But there is an element of me that I'm missing out. But also I think it doesn't help that I have this kind of old Peter Pan thing that I'm not aware that I am going to retire soon. Like that's closer now.
And so do you think there's something about when you become self-employed as well? Because normally if we become self-employed, we're pursuing a career that we want to be in, that we enjoy. And, you know, when, as you said, there's a certain amount of compromise, isn't there, when you're employed and you've got to toe the company line. But when you're doing your own thing, you've got that much more agency. You can choose your work hours to fit around whatever lifestyle you've got. So there might be that consideration of working longer anyway. Almost not being able to imagine not working. I know that I fall into that camp. So
100%. Like when I think about retirement, it doesn't ever look like not working in some guise, because exactly as you're saying, I love what I do. I literally, when I've had a call with someone, I'm so buzzed up by it. I get so much out of it. It's beyond money. So I don't see a time where I'm not working in some capacity. But equally, I don't want to be an idiot about my finances. You know, like I do think they could be working better for me. I think I just need to be braver.
Okay. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because like you use the word brave as though there is some sort of, some sort of fear attached to moving forward from here. Do you want to explain to me why you need to be brave to move forward?
I think because I see it's like a them and me concept around people who can invest, you know, like they're smart, or, you know, like I could put lots of words around, you know, like they're savvy, and I think, oh, that's not me. You know, like I always shop around for the best price if I'm buying something, and I think I've got that mentality around I'm this type of person, not that type of person. And it seems like a bit of a leap to be that person who is confident around money.
Okay, so when you were employed, were you a member of a pension scheme?
Yes.
Okay, and did you ever look at what that pension scheme was investing in?
No. No, and that's another challenge, Dee, like that I think about that. There's so much a part of this. So I've recently opened a private pension, and I did look at that, was like, you know, where do you want your money to be invested? And I thought, actually, that does really matter to me. And again, you know, and it goes back to that thing about you put your money in a savings account. You don't know what the bank's investing in. And I think that adds into another factor for me is world politics. I think, no, the money would be better just stashed under the bed. You know, like it just doesn't, and I think I'm looking for those problems. Okay. But equally, I don't want to capitalize on them. You know, like you see people who say, oh, now's a really good time to get into XYZ because of how bad this system is. And that feels uncomfortable for me too.
I think there's a mixture of things, isn't there, going on here? You kind of do know that you can't stay where you are. But I wonder if you're as profoundly aware of the financial erosion and stagnation and the damage that is doing to your long-term financial security as you should be.
Well, I do have a husband that regularly says this to me. I
don't want to judge your husband without ever having met him, but what we don't need is mansplaining.
Yeah. No, to be fair, I'm really lucky that we have a very good open relationship in terms of discussing things like this. And actually a big part of me going self-employed was to have a very big discussion about money and what it means to us, you know, as a couple. And so we bridged some conversations that perhaps we hadn't had before. And I know that many people don't. So that, and actually I would not talk about certain money things because I was so frightened of them, which actually wasn't helpful. So we got to a really good place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those conversations have been had, really.
Yes.
And you've got the hang of the fact that the fear is quite normal, but that really, if you get some structure organised, and it sounds like you're doing, so you've decided you need to put some of what you're earning into a pension. You've not got an employer pension anymore, which used to be, you know, part of the employment package. Now you're self-employed, you need to be providing that for yourself. And that pension pot can be that much longer term view. So you can, I like to encourage investors to exchange the word risk for opportunity.
Yeah.
So, you know, with your pension fund, because it's normally a longer term pot that's going to be spent the other side of your working life, you can afford to, invite more opportunity into that investment because it's longer term. Whereas the stuff that you might need to fill a hole next year, if the clients don't turn up that you were expecting, or if you need a longer holiday than you've budgeted for, that contingency pot, there's not much opportunity to make money out of that. You just need it not to ever be going down in value and just be parked somewhere that you can get hold of it. And then I think there's probably some structure where you could put a bit in between those.
Yeah.
So that might be spendable before retirement, but isn't on your radar as part of your contingency plan. So it's not your tax money, it's not your holiday contingency money, it's not the kind of cash flow for the business. But, you know, you're not really quite sure maybe what you're going to spend it on, but you might want to get to it before retirement. And to do something with that invites some opportunity into it, but maybe not as much as the pension, which is longer term. Because whenever you invite opportunity, and you need to do it by inviting more equity content, equity is stocks and shares. And despite what the news cycle would appear to tell us, you know, the majority of the time stocks and shares are going up. It's just that doesn't make the news because it's normal. But nevertheless, 3/4 of the time, the stock market is rising. 1/4 of the time it's falling. And that's the nature of a market. It prices, it corrects, it prices, it corrects. It's not a problem, it's a feature. So, the news likes to make it sound like a problem. But if we can see through all that and just ride the longer term experience of stock market investing, then we get a much nicer return than we do from cash deposits. And that return is real growth above equity, above inflation. So, and I really think that, you know, taking that longer term view with your pension pot is going to pay off for you. Having some agency over what it's invested in seems to be important to you as well. Yeah. So, you know, making choices around what you're supporting and what you're not investing in is entirely possible. I would say, Helen, that, thank God for people who look after the planet and the people who live here. You know, thank God for them. But when you are an investor, the way to really, really reduce risk is to have a little bit of everything everywhere all the time, in every currency, in every sector, in every country on the globe. And when you start saying, but not there and not there and none of that colour, and I don't want any of that, the investable universe is shrinking. Yeah. And so you're not as diversified as you are in a fully globally diversified portfolio. So there are things that can happen, like Russia invading Ukraine, which can have a massive impact on that type of portfolio that wouldn't have bothered a globally diversified portfolio, because guess what? That also invested in arms and oil, and they did great during that period. So you introduce what's called systemic risk in a focused portfolio. So that's something you need to bear in mind if you're going to screen your portfolio. And I know for a lot of us, it's really important that we're investing in line with our conscience. But I also think it's my job as your financial planner out there, everybody, to say your number one responsibility is to yourself and your own financial future. So, you know, have a think about that and how how much you're willing to lean into that focused portfolio risk, because there's no evidence, there's no historic data yet to tell us that there's any uptick in performance. Normally, if we're going to take on more risk, more opportunity, we want more performance. And there is no evidence that for your kind of lean into that systemic risk, you're getting a better performance out of it. So it's a real, more risk, no real return for the investors, except, of course, we all get to live on a planet that isn't burning up. So I don't know, I have to look at this as a financial planner and tell you the facts around it as a financial planning choice, without letting my own personal feelings get too dragged into the situation. And there's also evidence of a bit of an elevated cost when you're making socially responsible decisions with your investments. Tracking the biggest markets in massive globally diversified funds, it's as cheap as chips. The minute you start relying on more sophisticated, smaller indices that cost more to run, and you're asking somebody to make selective decisions, those people have got to be paid. Those indices are more expensive to sustain. So there's some uptick in cost as well. Just worth mentioning those two things. Having said that, the universe of investments that sit in that socially responsible space is ever growing, ever improving, and the more competition there is, the lower the prices are getting. So it's a nascent market with quite a lot of choice and opportunity in it these days. So that's really good news for people who want to invest with that socially responsible screen in place. So just a few thoughts there on using our investments to align with our conscience when investing, rather than choosing the other path, which is to say, actually, I can't save the planet with my pot of pension, but I can make sure I'm financially secure, and I'm not going to, ask my kids to pay my long-term care fees or that sort of thing. So it depends where you land with that sort of decision making. Having your immediate contingency fund, having your mid-term money, and having your longer-term money probably in your pension pool, I think also encourages you to make decisions which are about your immediate mid-term and long-term needs. Giving some weighting to the fact that if you leave it all in the bank because that seems easiest, you are doing yourself damage in that mid and long-term arena. It's not that no action is cost free. It's actually really quite expensive. It's just you don't bear the cost next year. You bear it next decade. Yeah. So you push the pain away by making, by not taking action or not making a decision. So I'm glad that you've bitten into this and gone ahead and sorted that pension out. And I guess the next step is to think about whether you could persuade yourself to let go of some of that liquidity that you're keeping close because it represents security, and maybe put it in a slightly less opportunistic investment than your pension, but something a bit more ambitious than cash. What do you think?
No, I think definitely I'm really interested in that. I think the fear again around that is the words I don't understand. And I opened a trading 212 account because Money Saving Martin did a thing a while ago where I think if you invested £1, they gave you 40 or something to put in a stocks and shares account. So I did that.
A little bit of bribery.
It worked for me. And I looked the other day and I was like, oh, I've got £70 now, and that's been like a couple of months of me just not looking at it. So that was exciting. But I kind of look at it and I'm like, I don't understand what any of these abbreviations mean. And it feels like, when you go to horse races and you go, oh, that sounds like a nice name, I'll put some money on that. It feels like a bigger version of that as a risk.
Or somebody tells you the technical spec of a car and you say, what colour is it?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think knowledge is power when it comes to that sort of thing. And the only way to tackle that is to get curious rather
Yeah.
than get kind of cross or frustrated, is to get curious about what it all means and find out the bits that you need to know to keep yourself safe and make informed decisions. There's no doubt about it that financial services loves to wrap itself up in its own language. And I find it very frustrating myself. But I also find that I use terms like, does anyone know what ISA actually stands for?
No.
It's become so much part of our language that we say ISA without ever considering what it actually means. And it does stand for individual savings account for anybody who's interested. But like we all kind of use ISA, don't we, as an adopted?
Yeah.
And what happens is like once you get professionals involved, they've got acronyms for everything. So and we've kind of given them permission to use quite a few of them, haven't we? So
well, even coming to that, like my husband and I had a conversation about ISAs just last week, and I literally thought, because you can have one a year, I thought it meant you had to keep opening new accounts. It's like, and he's literally writing it down for me, going, no.
You can add to the one you've got. You can
exactly.
just only add a certain amount.
What does that mean? But I think it's exactly as you've said about being curious, because I've done that whole thing. Oh, it's not for people like me, and therefore shut down. Like, I don't understand. I've put it in the too complicated box. Whereas my commitment actually for this year is to move into, okay, like, let's become more financially confident, and what do I need to do to kind of do that? Because I think, exactly as you're saying, I'm not doing myself any favors. I'm probably doing more harm than good. So for me, this has definitely been something that's on my radar for some time, and I do like personal challenges. So obviously, one being setting up business for myself. Tick that box. I gave up drinking 4 years ago. It's like I can do big things. So this is my one for this year, is to develop my financial confidence.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing it. I think you'll feel better for it. I think fear is normal. And, we need to just accept that, that level of anxiety when you're trying something new is normal. But what is way too costly is kind of inaction, and burying our head in the sands, because we might not have the cost of that from a financial perspective this year, but we will have it in the future. So we owe it to our future selves to try and kind of conquer that and press on with a little bit of knowledge and education, and maybe some structures. So some like short-term, mid-term, long-term plans, so that we feel more confident about moving forward. And it's not like I'll do it in an ISA because I don't know what else to do. It's no, I'm doing it in an ISA because that's my 5 to 10 year pot. I'm doing it in a pension because that's my 10-year plus pot. I'm leaving it in the bank because that's my contingency pot. And we know what money belongs where, and we're giving that saying, giving every pound a purpose, so that it has a place in the plan. And we don't get caught out then. We don't get caught out with not having enough liquidity to pay a tax bill. We don't get caught out by not being able to capitalise on the opportunity to travel with some friends who are celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, a destination celebration. We don't go, oh, I don't think I could afford that because I'd have to take a week off work. And, we've got a pot to cover those sort of things. And then we're not worried about retirement either. Even if we might want to work on, and we're enjoying our self-employed status and the rewards that we get from working, it might still be nice to go down to 3 days a week from a certain period. And we don't have to fear our kind of energy levels changing and us needing to have a bit more of a kind of downtime to complement our workspace. So I think all of those things they just build a structure where you can step forward with confidence, and make meaningful decisions around the money. So it's not in the bank because you can't be bothered to do anything else with it. It's in the bank because it's got a purpose to be there. And if it's not, it's in your midterm. And if it's not in the midterm, it's in the long term. And that way you get the most opportunity.
It's really nice, and actually those two things certainly are real key takeaways for me about the short, medium and long term, and give every pound a purpose. Like, I really like that. And I think, like, to develop the kind of financial confidence, there's definitely been something about understanding what do I want my future to look like. So if I think about retirement, when might that be and what might I want to do? So how much money do I need for that? You know, like it's because I think that really helps me almost visualize why I'm saving. So I think like the give every pound a purpose thing is like, well, which pot do I want to put this in? Because how do I want this to work for me? You know, how does it contribute to the end goal? So there's definitely been something around knowing what I want the end goal to look like so that it makes sense for me why I'm doing this.
Well, I'm glad that's been useful. I'm really hoping that by telling these stories and having these conversations, other women will hear them and get some takeaways from it as well. And understand that all of this is really quite normal. It's the normal process for us as human beings when we're thinking about these decisions to go through a level of anxiety and then step into some new information and then build ourselves a bit of a framework so that we can move forward with a bit of confidence. And thank you for sharing your story, which I'm sure a number of people are going to resonate with. I know that a lot of the people in the women's wealth community, like you and I, are kind of in a self-employed position where they've got to look after themselves. So that's really important. And I like the fact that your success story comes with the anxiety of then having to do something about the success you're having.
It's a very funny position to be in.
Life's a bit like that, isn't it? It's kind of almost, it's almost hard to enjoy the success. Because
I think we always tell ourselves that story, or it will be easy when, you know, or it'll be easier when, you know, like when you're a kid and you think, well, when I leave home, everything will be fine. And because you don't factor in, oh, I have to pay the bills and, you know, like da, da, da. So there's always something else to learn. As you say, it's another opportunity. And I think, and I guess the thing for me is that if I think about investing now, well, that's something I take with me forever, isn't it? Because even when I'm being paid my pension, I can still invest something, you know, so it's like, how do I build these skills today? Like, it's never too late to learn because I'm mid-50s now. I can certainly learn this because I foresee having at least another 30 years, which is a very long time, you know, so it's worth learning this skill now.
Yeah, and you know, it's lifelong learning is good for us anyway. But I can promise you that my 30 years in finance tell me that whatever it is I think I know this year, by next year they will have changed some of the rules, some of the tax laws, some of the opportunities. The global economic environment will have shifted. Geopolitics will have gone, I don't know where from here. So, like, you know, it's dynamic. So, you know, it's not only learning it, it's starting to stay engaged with it and understand how it's impacting you. I think there's even a moment, if you can imagine this, where you might enjoy it.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that.
I really am very grateful to you for sharing your story with us, Helen. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave it there. I'm Sam Seckham, and this is Women's Wealth. This is our Financial Dilemmas podcast, because every woman deserves clarity, confidence, and a plan for the future.